These are frightening days, are they not?
Yes. Yeah.
If not for Jesus. But fortunately, those of us who are Christians, we know who has the last word. Amen. And regarding your comment about dancing, I just want to share this. I'm just going to share. People ask me, do Baptists dance? And I say, some can and some can't. That is. I went to First Baptist Church of Pearland in 1990. I was right in the prime of ministry. I still had hair at that point. I'd spent about 15 years in full-time evangelism, and so I hit the field preaching Jesus and giving invitations, and God just fell on the entire community. Over the first 18 months we were there, we baptized 500 new converts into the church. It was the best of times. One day, standing at the back of the church, Pastor, you know how people are always complimentary, whether they mean it or not. People were walking out saying all kinds of nice things about how the church was growing, how proud they were of what God was doing. But one lady said, "Preacher, are you going to the high school assembly tomorrow?" Well, I didn't want to look like an ignoramus, but I hadn't even heard there was one. And when I investigated it, I should have, because the kids had all come home with notes, and we had 2 kids in the high school in our family. They had a note saying that there was going to be a controversial assembly about sex education. If you didn't want your child to attend, sign this note, send it back, and your child will go to study hall. Well, I found out later that my 2 children, in an effort to spare their father, were struggling with that and decided that they wouldn't tell me about it. But I found out about it. But I decided, that we've raised them right. They're mature. They can handle this. I looked back at my own high school career. We had sex education when I was in the 8th grade. They took all the boys in the boys' gym, all the girls in the girls' gym. They blackened the windows with tar paper. They showed us about a half hour of 60-millimeter projection of people with gonorrhea, syphilis, insane, losing their mind, their teeth falling out. And they turned the lights back on. They said, if you do that, you'll get this. And it worked. It took us about 3 years of married life to get over that half hour of sex education. Little did I know that they had progressed a long way from then. So I allowed my children to attend, but I also sent our youth pastor to cover that. I used to brag all the time that I was just like Moses. My associate pastor's name was Rod, and so I leaned on my rod as my staff. And so Rod went down. He came back to my office after that first assembly, and he was so taken by the content, he would not repeat what he'd seen, but it made it clear to me I needed to check it out. So, and I'll try to make this real brief. I can turn this into an hour story real quick. But I went racing back down there for the 5th of 5 assemblies. As God would have it, my own daughter was a senior. We'd moved right in the middle of her junior year, and she had some struggles already with that transition at that stage of her life. When I saw Misty, I said to myself, no matter how bad this is, just keep it to yourself. I took with me a pocket recorder, and in the back of my mind, how bad can this be? But I set that pocket recorder down and started taping the young lady's planned remarks. Well, she started talking about every sex act you can imagine, and some, frankly, you should not imagine. The only rule with her is use one of these. And she pulled out a condom, stretched it, made a couple of lewd remarks about the size of the male organ, blew it up like a balloon, and held it and said, "This will protect you from the dread disease of GRIDS." That's what they were calling AIDS at that point in time, gay-related immune deficiency syndrome. And that was what this whole assembly was ultimately about, is how to protect yourself from GRIDS. Of course, the plan was, do whatever you like, just escape the consequences. Well, when she held that thing up, made that remark, I raised my hand. She looked at me and thought I was probably the principal. I was dressed in a suit that day. She said, "Yes, sir." When I said, "Ma'am," I could see Misty, she almost passed out. She had no clue I was present. I said, "Ma'am, you just said that these kids would be 94% protected against the dread disease of AIDS. That's not true. I've been studying this subject." Well, boy, about that time, a teacher jumped up across the room, whom I later found out was a home economics teacher. She shouted, "Well, that statistic's true because I read it in a teen magazine." I thought, we're turning to teen magazines for something of life and death consequence? But I knew this wasn't the time for a big debate. I'm tape recording all of this. I'm going to walk it through proper channels. So I just sat down courteously, and this young lady at that point, she was 24 years old, went into a diatribe about her own sex life, how she was AIDS infected, and how she was using condoms with her boyfriend so he would be safe. I remember putting my head in my hands, folks, and this is not an exaggeration. I began having a fight to choke back tears as I thought about how many kids are going to die today because of this misinformation. When it was over, all the young people had to go right by where I was seated because I was right by the exit. And I'm telling you, I got a lot of stares, a lot of comments. The one that really mattered to me was Misty. Misty, when she got to me, said, "Dad, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you." I'll tell you, it was like saying, "Sick it to a cur dog," to have your daughter tell you that. But here's the short of it. After I approached Amy, that was the girl's name, shared with her the heartache that I felt because of what she'd done, I then went back to my office and I called a practicing attorney named Cactus Cagle. He was our county judge for 20 years. I said, "Cactus, if I just secretly recorded a high school assembly, if I make it public, will I be sued? Can I be sued?" He said, "Preacher, let me check it out." In the 2-hour interim, I decided, no matter what he says, I'm going to make it public. If I can be sued, I'm going to do it as a private individual. If not, I'm going to do it as the pastor of First Baptist Church, which gives it more weight. He called me back. He said, "Rick, in Texas, public assembly is public information. You can do whatever you want to with it." So I then put on our signboard on the busiest thoroughfare on the southeast side of Houston, "If you want to hear what the kids heard at PHS, Pearland High School, come Sunday morning." I'm here to tell you, this was probably the most effective get out new people effort I ever put forward. This was a crazy idea to get people in church. And here's what happened. We couldn't get them all in the following Sunday. Between the 400 kids in that assembly and the word on the street and the signboard, everybody wanted to be a part of it. Along with a Chronicle reporter who showed up that morning. I stood in the pulpit. After I looked at the crowd, I thought, this is a great chance to share Jesus, so I preached first. Then I sat them all down, and I began reading the 12-page, single-spaced manuscript, 4-letter words and all, and she used them all. The longer I read this, the madder people in that church congregation got. I mean, I saw the good old boys, they were ready to burn the high school to the ground. I called them down and I said, "I've already requested an opportunity to speak to the school board. That happens a week from tomorrow. In the meantime, we're just going to pray." I can tell you all about it. Much has been written about it. In fact, Rafael has even reported some of this in his own book. But here's what happened. We got a church mobilized. We started encouraging our people to run for public office. We were no longer going to be sitting on the sidelines just letting things happen. It wasn't long until we occupied 4 of the 7 school board positions as members of our church. Then we occupied 3 of the 5 city council positions out of our church. Christiane Amanpour and CNN showed up and followed me around for about 6 months and put out a documentary called God's Warriors, which partly featured what we were doing. But she closed it by saying, "Rick Scarborough's gains will be short-lived." Well, let me give you the final word on that. 3 of our members went on and served in the state legislature with distinction. 1 died in office, and there's a high school named after her. Another one still sits in that office, and the 3rd one, Randy Weber, is now a U.S. congressman. I taught Bible study for 18 months in his office just over the last 2 years. Out of that group of people, several went on to serve in the county and district courts of law. My own secretary's husband left private law practice. He's now been a sitting county judge for the last 20 years or so. Our church decided we weren't going to be victims any longer. We found out that when Christians engage, things happen. Among other things, we saw a revival take place in Pearland, Texas. Church grew. We baptized 2,000 people while we were also changing the culture. And this lie and this myth that the church cannot be involved or shouldn't be come right out of the pit of hell. May we set that record straight again tonight.